Hey there, it's Melanie Benson here. We've got a Amplify tip for you. And today it's all about how you can speed up results, get yourself in front of more of your ideal audience, be able to tap into other people's networks by borrowing influence from others. So, a lot of times when people are telling me they're not getting enough sales, they're not getting asked to speak at events, they're not getting those coveted visibility opportunities, what I've noticed is they're really flying under the radar. And maybe it's because they don't have consistency. Maybe it's because they don't have their messaging right. But there's some things that I think really make a big difference. And so I'm all about amplifying the work you do in the world. Like, I want to see you be able to stand out in a crowded market. And it can sometimes feel daunting and overwhelming because there's a lot to do. So this is maybe we'll call it a little bit of a hack, something that you can do quickly, that's super effective, that whatever visibility and authority platform that you're putting out there in the world, this is really a key part of it. Okay. So what we're talking about today is amplifying your authority. And if you've got questions, make sure you put them in the group for me. I want to hear what your questions are as we go along, because when we wrap up this tip today, I want to hear from you, like how you can put this into action. So let me first of all just take a step back and say, what do I mean by amplifying your authority by borrowing influence? So one of the things about people who have built up their own brand presence and they have been getting some traction with their message, their offerings are really working well, they're building up a loyal community, they've got an avid fan base, people who can't wait to hear from them next. What happens is they tend to build influence in the eyes of their community. And so if you are not feeling like your name and your brand and your authority is really shining bright enough yet, we can speed up and really kind of help boost our own influence and authority by borrowing it from others. And this is something it's a win-win for everybody. So it's not like you're taking anything from anyone. Your competitors have influence you can borrow. Your colleagues who share the same client base can, lend you their credibility and authority, and everybody wins. That's what I love about these techniques is this is not anybody taking from anyone else or doing something that's taking clients or referrals or anything from others. It's simply a way that everybody collaborates and connects and builds momentum together. So I want to take a peek at my list. So if I'm looking away a little bit, just know, because I've got 5 of my favorite ways to borrow other people's influence that I want to talk about today. Now, you can probably guess what my most favorite is. I'm going to go in order of my favorite first. And that is, of course, drum roll, guesting on other influencers' podcasts. Okay. If you've been following along the tips I've been putting here in the group and I've been sharing on all my different platforms, podcasting is not going away. As a matter of fact, it's growing at the speed of light, even with the emergence of these audio platforms like Clubhouse, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Podcasting is still off the hook. 2 million podcasts at the beginning of the year were active. And here's what's really cool. If you haven't heard me talk about this, this is one of my favorite techniques. And that is you can actually borrow influence from your competitors and your most influential colleagues if they host a podcast. Because guess what? If they're interviewing other people, they need content. And they're more likely to partner up with you and share your superpowers and your message to their audience on a podcast than they would be to do an email promotion for you or joint venture or any of the other popular collaboration strategies. So I think it's super important. And if you haven't started doing this yet, this one is something that everybody can do, especially if you've already got a magnetic messaging system in place, is get on other influential people's podcasts. Now, there's a whole thing about how to do that well. I do teach it in Get Magnetic Messaging. If you're like, okay, that's not working for me, or I've been trying to pitch people and I'm not getting on, I get it. Like, the more in demand they are, the harder it is unless you have a personal relationship, which kind of helps you cut through the noise a little bit. But number one, most favorite way to do this is to get on other influential people's podcasts. You've probably heard me say this before, but I often, and I can tell the more influence and the more of the authority relationship people have with their podcasting community, because the podcasts that I get like clients from within the first 2 weeks are often the ones that have the most energy and momentum with their audiences. And that doesn't mean other ones aren't great. It just sometimes it kind of sneaks in a little bit later. But if people are doing a great job of building community around their podcast, which we do here at Amplify Your Success, then you definitely want to make sure you're getting in front of that audience. I can't even tell you, like, it's probably been 45, 50, maybe even more $1,000 that of new business and amazing clients who were referred to me from the episode I did on John Lee Dumas's podcast, Entrepreneur on Fire, 9 years ago. I was literally in his first season before he totally blew up. So it works. So that's number one. Oh, number one, guest on other people's podcasts. Number two, invite influencers to do a video series with you on your podcast or show. So look, I know some people are like, oh, I love the idea of a podcast, but I don't know. It seems like a lot of work. I get it. I wrote a whole blog post about whether or not you should host your own podcast. But here's why I want you to consider doing your own podcast. The difference between being a guest and being a host is authority positioning. Yes, you can borrow some great authority and get your message out there on other people's podcasts, but there's nothing like being in the driver's seat to really propel your authority to the next level. Now, here's where it gets really good. And if you don't have your own podcast, you can do this with a video show. You can do it in a lot of different ways. I'll talk about a couple other ideas here in a second. But if you invite highly influential people onto your podcast, first of all, that's a celebrity presence on your podcast, right? Especially the more celebrity status they have in their market, the more well-known they are, the more authority you're borrowing from them, the more influence you're borrowing from them. Now, you can get them to share that podcast even better. So a lot of people start their podcasts and they don't necessarily turn to other people. They do their own episodes in the beginning, which I get why you want to do that. But you want your podcast to grow quickly. You want to really bump up followers quickly. Interview influential people in your space. It makes a big difference. So that's two. Invite influencers to do an interview with you in your podcast or on your show. So if you don't have a podcast, guess what? You can do this on video. There is so much great tech. Right now we're using StreamYard, a little plug for StreamYard. But there's a lot of different ways you can go live on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever your platform is, interview someone else in video. Then you can repurpose that episode in a lot of different ways, or you can strip the audio out and drop it into a podcast later. See, there's lots of ways to do it. Now, let's get into number three. Gather influencers to one of these new emerging audio platforms. I'm going to talk about this more next week. We're going to be doing a 3-part live series right here in Amplify Your Authority Facebook group. So you want to make sure you tune in, save it on your calendar, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to go live 3 days in a row. Here's why having other influencers, gathering on audio is so good. So my favorite right now is Clubhouse. My second favorite is Twitter. But look, all the social media platforms are building their own version of it. Clubhouse being the first to the market means they're getting a lot more traction. And here's why I like it. Clubhouse is like the wild, wild west right now. And because its rise in popularity was in such momentum, there are millions of people on there. And there are people looking for great content. And because you don't have to be camera ready, you don't have to have like an amazing audio setup, you don't have to pay anybody to do anything on these audio platforms. All you have to do is decide on a topic and invite some other influential people to come have this conversation with you, and then watch the followers start to build up quickly on Clubhouse. So I went from having 0 followers at the beginning of the year. I think we just hit 1.3 thousand, maybe even we're close to 1.4. And my trick was simply show up and be a guest or host the conversations. Okay. And I know I'm really skimming over the top level of what Clubhouse is about. This isn't necessarily a Clubhouse conversation today. You're welcome to join me any Monday at 3 p.m. in Clubhouse. I do a weekly show with my friend Deborah Cole. But let me just tell you the difference between having influencers in that conversation with you versus people who maybe don't have any influence yet is night and day. And so people are scanning and looking for rooms to pop into based on names they recognize. Okay, so the other thing that I think happens is that there's one of the things I love about Clubhouse is the collaboration is really high. So there's not always a lot of like strategic focus. Like no one's trying to launch anything half the time. They're simply there to have really powerful conversations. And because most of the rooms are not recorded, and you can record, but that does require some tech setup. But because they're not being recorded, there's a level of authenticity that's very powerful. So Clubhouse is this emerging platform that influencers are super excited to participate in. And it's a great way to build momentum. As a matter of fact, I'm about ready to take my Amplify Inner Circle through a little tour. And the people that I'm working with one-on-one and mastermind level, we are going to build out Clubhouse strategies to help them really get a fast start with their podcast, because Clubhouse and podcasting works very well together. All right, so that's number 3. I may have to bring a special guest on in the near future to do more justice on Clubhouse. But for the sake of today, just know that if you're not on Clubhouse or you're not tuning into the audio platforms, there's going to be a huge surge of connection opportunity, of collaboration opportunity, and visibility that is very powerful in attracting new client bases on these audio platforms. So pay attention to them. Find one that you like. Number 4, host a summit or event. So this is a little bit going old school. So Clubhouse being new school, hosting a summit or event might be a little bit more old school, but it is still a tried and true way to collaborate with other influencers and get a surge of new members into your list and attract new buyers and to borrow influence from other successful people in your market. So a summit, if you're not familiar with it, would be where you gather 15, 10, 20, and some people like to do really big ones and do a lot more, where you have a certain number of people who cover different subjects. You gather them all during a certain period of time, usually within 1 week period, and you showcase them to an audience who's coming in specifically to hear about this summit or this event, if you're doing it in more of like a 1 or 2 day experience. This is very, very powerful to create surge of momentum for an offer you want to make. When people are trying to introduce a new offer to a list that's small, or they haven't really nurtured very much for a while, you can get some pretty disappointing results. And I've had a lot of clients over the years say, oh, I'll just see who responds on my list. And then they're like, I didn't get enough people. And I actually notice it myself. If I partner up with a collection of my favorite influential voices in my space, or I do it to my own list, radical difference in momentum and in purchases. Because what's happening is you're borrowing influence from the people who you've invited to come in and speak, or you've invited to help promote in some way. And this is a new audience who are actively searching for a solution to the problem they have. So pay attention and really think about, how can I collaborate with others to create a surge of new subscribers, a surge of new eyes, a surge of new, like we might even say hungry people for an offer. Okay, so host a summit or event of some kind, or get creative and do something along those lines, but invite others who are influential in your space, who share your target audience, to participate. All right, let's get to my 5th one. We're going to go off social media. Well, I guess this is a part of social media, but I want to take it out of the audio and video realm and into just something that anybody can do. And that is articles and blog posts. So one of the things that I saw a huge kind of resurgence of in the last 12 months is people who are actively showcasing other influential people in a blog or article. Now, some of these are PR people who are really great at curating great wisdom from influential people because they know when the article goes live and it's shared on all the social media platforms, they're going to get more traction with people who have big followings. Some of this is just people who really like they're building up that know, like, and trust factor, and they're trying to build up some collaboration currency with other influencers, which is a whole thing, collaboration currency. And so they'll ask people who are really influential in their space to contribute a tip or answer a set of questions that they're weaving into an article. I have had so many features in the last 18 months compared to the last 18 years. I would say it's probably about the same. The amount of features in the last 18 years, it kind of matches pretty closely what's happened in the last 18 months. And this really works if you're a writer or you have a lot of good traction with your blog or you write for a portal. Think about who could you invite to contribute a tip, like answers to a set of questions that you're asking everybody, and craft a really compelling article that when everybody comes together is going to share it on their social media when it goes live. If you want a couple examples of this, I'll hook a couple up in the comments below. But two that came out, one was last year during the height of the pandemic. A PR lady wrote an article featuring 10 of us who are really active on Twitter. And that thing just got so much traction. And I actually ended up getting like a media opportunity out of it because someone ran across the article. I've just recently, another PR lady was writing an article for an overseas online magazine, and she asked me to write about imposter syndrome. And I got to give a little shout out to Deb Coleman in the Amplify Mastermind for tagging me on it and saying, I think you should interview Melanie. So this happens a lot, and it's great traction. And one other direction on that where you can collaborate with other influencers is if you do have a podcast or you have some other way that you want to feature people, like Steve Gordon did a really great blog post a couple years ago where he spotlighted 25 of the hot podcasters that he recommended people listen to their podcasts. And then he had them share 5 more people that they loved. And I ended up making that list for Amplify Your Success. Again, a lot of great traction for the show. So get creative. These are 5 of my favorite ways to borrow influence and really start to gain momentum in your followers, in your list building, and to get more eyes on your offers and more people tuning into your message. So if you got something I missed that you're like, gotta put it on the list, Melanie, put it in the comments. Tell me about it. Love to hear it. Keep in mind, I'm only capturing 5 of my favorites. There's probably at least 20 ways you can do this, including joint venture promotions and things like that. But I wanted to keep it simple where no matter where you're at in your business, no matter what you're doing, you can actually tap into any of these and get great, get traction from it. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I was on another screen here. By interviewing others, let me put this up. I wish I knew who was saying them, but by interviewing others, you credentialize them and they share with others the fact that you interviewed them. Yeah, totally agree. And let me cover the other one. Love Clubhouse, and it's been an awesome place to identify new guests for my podcast, and I get to learn from you. High five. I agree. And thank you for sharing that. We're going to go deeper into Clubhouse in next week's series. Okay, keep the great comments coming. Tell me what's working for you. And tell me which of these 5 will you put into action. Okay, remember, wisdom and knowledge is only as good as what you actually take action on and implement. So I want to hear how you're going to implement something that we talked about today and what comes out of it. Like, keep me posted. Tell me what comes out at the end of results for you. And if you need fine tuning, remember, Get Magnetic Messaging is a great program to help you pull all the pieces together and structure that message and structure your offers in a way that you're building a golden thread between the message you're putting out there and the action that you invite people to take. Okay, we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.